Emma Rodriguez clutched her swollen belly as she stood in the back of the crowded community center, watching the annual village auction unfold before her. At 7 months pregnant, she had no business being here, but desperation had driven her to this point. The medical bills from her pregnancy complications were mounting, and her husband Jake's construction job barely covered their basic needs. The auctioneer, a burly man named Marcus Thompson, called out lot after lot with practiced efficiency. Families bid enthusiastically on everything from handmade quilts to vintage furniture, their voices echoing off the worn wooden walls. Emma fingered the crumpled $20 bill in her pocket, hopping against hope that something affordable would come up that she could resell for a profit. Next up, we have Lot 47, Marcus announced, his voice booming through the microphone. A box of miscellaneous items donated by the Peterson estate. Starting bid is $5. Emma's heart sank as she watched the bidding quickly escalate. The Peterson family had been wealthy landowners in the area for generations, and everyone knew their belongings were likely valuable. She watched helplessly as the price climbed to 30, then $50, far beyond her meager budget. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd began to thin. Families loaded their purchases into trucks and cars, chattering excitedly about their finds. Emma remained in her spot against the wall, growing more discouraged with each passing hour. Her back ached from standing, and the baby seemed to be doing somersaults in her womb. "Are you all right, dear?" asked an elderly woman with kind eyes, noticing Emma's discomfort. "I'm fine, thank you," Emma replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. The shooting pains in her lower back had been getting worse all day, but she attributed them to being on her feet too long. By evening, only a handful of people remained in the community center. The excitement of the early hours had given way to a more subdued atmosphere as the less desirable items came up for bid. Emma noticed that Marcus Thompson kept checking his watch, clearly eager to wrap up the event. "Lot 98, Marcus called out, his voice noticeably less enthusiastic than it had been hours earlier. Another box of miscellaneous items, this one from the old Whitmore property. The family couldn't be bothered to go through it all before the estate sale. Starting bid is $2. Emma perked up slightly. $2 was within her budget, and the Whitmore name carried some weight in the community. She raised her hand tentatively, her heart racing as she made her first bid of the day. $2 to the lady in the back, Marcus acknowledged, though he seemed surprised that anyone was interested in the dusty, unremarkable box sitting on the auction table. The few remaining bidders glanced at the box with disinterest. It appeared to contain nothing more than old books, papers, and what looked like costume jewelry. Emma held her breath, praying that no one else would bid against her. "Going once, going twice," Marcus called out, scanning the room for any other interested parties. Emma's heart pounded as she waited for the final call. This might be her only chance to buy something today, and she desperately needed it to work out. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing her anxiety, and she placed a protective hand over her belly. "Sold to the pregnant lady for $2, Marcus announced, bringing his gavel down with a decisive thud. "Please see me after the auction to arrange payment and pick up." Relief flooded through Emma as she realized she had actually won something. She made her way carefully to the front of the room, navigating around the remaining chairs and boxes. The other bidders were already collecting their purchases and heading for the exits, leaving Emma as one of the last people in the building. As she approached the auction table, Emma got her first close look at her purchase. The cardboard box was old and slightly water-damaged, with Whitmore Attic written in faded ink on the side. Inside, she could see a jumbled collection of items that looked like they had been hastily thrown together. "That'll be $2, Marcus said, extending his hand for payment. His earlier enthusiasm had completely disappeared, replaced by obvious fatigue and irritation at having to deal with such a small transaction. Emma handed over her crumpled $20 bill, and Marcus counted out her change with barely concealed impatience. "Box is yours now," he said curtly. "Building closes in 15 minutes, so you'll need to get it loaded up." The box was heavier than Emma had expected, and she struggled to lift it with her pregnant belly in the way. Her back screamed in protest, and she had to pause to catch her breath. The shooting pains were getting more frequent now, and she was beginning to worry that something might be wrong. "Need help with that?" asked a voice behind her. Emma turned to see a young man in his 20s, probably one of the auction volunteers. He had sandy brown hair and wore a name tag that read David. "I can manage," Emma said, though she was grateful for the offer. She didn't want to appear helpless, especially not in front of strangers. "You sure about that?" David asked, nodding her obvious discomfort. "That box looks pretty heavy, and you shouldn't be lifting stuff like that in your condition." Emma's pride warred with her practical need for assistance. Another sharp pain shot through her lower back, making the decision for her. "Actually, if you wouldn't mind helping me get it to my car, I'd really appreciate it." David easily lifted the box and followed Emma out to the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the nearly empty lot. Emma's old Honda Civic looked even more battered next to the few remaining trucks and SUVs. "Just set it in the back seat," Emma instructed, unlocking the car doors. "Thank you so much for your help." "No problem," David replied, carefully placing the box on the seat. "Hope you find some good stuff in there. The Whitmore family was pretty well off back in the day." Emma nodded, though she wasn't getting her hopes up. The box looked like it contained nothing more than old junk, but at least it was her junk now. She climbed into the driver's seat, wincing as another pain shot through her back. The drive home to her small rental house took 20 minutes, and Emma had to pull over twice to deal with increasingly intense back pain. By the time she pulled into her driveway, she was beginning to suspect that these weren't just the usual aches and pains of pregnancy. Jake's truck was already in the driveway, which meant he was home from work. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. Whatever was happening with her body, at least she wouldn't have to deal with it alone. She struggled out of the car, leaving the box for now, and made her way carefully up the front steps. The porch light was on, and she could see Jake through the window, sitting at their small kitchen table with what looked like a pile of bills spread out in front of him. "Jake," she called out as she opened the front door, "I'm back." "How'd it go?" Jake asked, looking up from the bills. He was a tall, lean man with calloused hands and worry lines that seemed to deepen every day. "Please tell me you didn't spend money we don't have." Emma was about to respond when another pain, stronger than any of the previous ones, doubled her over. She grabbed onto the doorframe for support, gasping as the pain radiated through her entire midsection. "Emma," Jake was on his feet immediately, rushing to her side. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "I don't know," Emma managed to say between gasps. "The pain started at the auction, but it's getting worse. I think we might need to go to the hospital." Jake's face went pale. They both knew that another hospital visit would mean more medical bills they couldn't afford, but they also knew they couldn't take any chances with the baby's health. "Okay, let's go," Jake said, grabbing his keys from the counter. "Can you walk to the truck?" Emma nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. The pains were coming more frequently now, and she was starting to panic. She had another month to go before her due date, and complications this early could mean serious problems for both her and the baby. As they made their way to Jake's truck, Emma caught a glimpse of the box still sitting in the back seat of her car. In all the chaos, she had completely forgotten about her $2 purchase. It seemed insignificant now, compared to what might be happening with her pregnancy. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Jake drove as carefully as he could while still trying to get there quickly, and Emma gripped the door handle so tightly her knuckles turned white. The contractions, for that's what she was now sure they were coming every few minutes. "It's going to be okay," Jake kept saying, though Emma could hear the fear in his voice. "We're almost there." The emergency room at Riverside General was busy, as it always seemed to be. Jake helped Emma to the registration desk, where a tired-looking nurse took down their information. Emma's insurance was basic at best, and she knew that even this visit would cost them hundreds of dollars they didn't have. Preterm labor, the doctor confirmed after examining Emma. We're going to need to keep you here for observation and possibly give you medication to stop the contractions. Emma's heart sank. A hospital stay meant even more medical bills, and they were already behind on the ones from her earlier pregnancy complications. Jake held her hand tightly as the doctor explained the treatment plan, but Emma could see the worry in his eyes. "We'll do whatever we need to do," Jake said firmly. "Just take care of my wife and baby." As they settled into the hospital room, Emma's thoughts drifted back to the box in her car. She had spent her last $20 on what was probably nothing more than old junk, and now they were facing thousands of dollars in additional medical expenses. The irony wasn't lost on her. The medication the doctors gave her seemed to be working. The contractions were becoming less frequent and less intense, though Emma was still experiencing significant discomfort. The baby's heartbeat was strong and steady, which was the most important thing. "I should call your mom," Jake said, pulling out his phone. "She'll want to know what's happening." Emma nodded, though she dreaded the conversation. Her mother would worry and want to rush over, but she lived 3 hours away and had her own financial struggles. The last thing Emma wanted was to burden her family with more problems. As Jake stepped out to make the call, Emma stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she had been so hopeful about the auction, thinking she might find something valuable that could help with their financial situation. Now she was lying in a hospital bed, facing even more debt and uncertainty. The next morning brought both good news and bad news. The good news was that the medication had successfully stopped Emma's preterm labor, and the baby appeared to be healthy and developing normally. The bad news was that Emma would need to remain on bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy, which meant she couldn't work the part-time job she had been doing from home. "Complete bed rest," the doctor emphasized as he reviewed Emma's discharge instructions. "No lifting, no prolonged standing, no stress. I know it's difficult, but it's the best way to ensure you carry this baby to full term." Emma nodded, though she was already calculating the financial impact in her head. Without her small income from data entry work, they would have to rely entirely on Jake's construction wages. It would be tight, tighter than they had ever been before. The ride home was quiet, both Emma and Jake lost in their own thoughts. The box from the auction was still sitting in the back seat of Emma's car, a reminder of her failed attempt to improve their situation. She had spent $2 she could have saved, and for what? A box of old junk that was probably worthless. "I'm sorry," Emma said finally, breaking the silence. "About the auction, about spending money we needed. I just thought." Hey, Jake interrupted, reaching over to squeeze her hand. You don't need to apologize for anything. We're going to figure this out, okay? We always do. Emma wished she shared his confidence. They had been struggling financially for months, and now with her forced bed rest and the new medical bills, she didn't see how they could possibly make ends meet. Jake was already working as many hours as he could get, and there wasn't much more he could do. Back at home, Jake helped Emma get settled on the couch with pillows and blankets. The doctor had been clear that she needed to stay horizontal as much as possible, which meant their small living room would be her world for the next month or so. "I'll bring in that box from the car," Jake said, trying to inject some enthusiasm into his voice. "Maybe there's something good in there after all." Emma didn't have the heart to tell him that she had already glimpsed the contents and seen nothing but old papers and costume jewelry. She watched through the window as he retrieved the box from her car, noting how heavy it seemed even for him. "Wow, this thing is heavier than it looks," Jake said as he set it down on the coffee table next to the couch. "What exactly did you buy?" "I'm not really sure," Emma admitted. "It was one of the last lots, and I could only afford to bid $2. I thought maybe there might be something I could resell, but looking at it now, I don't think there's anything valuable in there." Jake opened the box and began pulling out items one by one. There were old books with yellowed pages, faded photographs, costume jewelry that looked like it came from a dime store, and stacks of papers held together with rubber bands that had long since lost their elasticity. "Well, some of these books might be worth something," Jake said hopefully, examining a leather-bound volume. "And these photographs are pretty old. People collect vintage photos sometimes." Emma appreciated his optimism, but she could tell he was grasping at straws. The books were common classics that could be found in any used bookstore, and the photographs, while old, didn't appear to be of anyone famous or historically significant. "What about these papers?" Jake asked, picking up one of the stacks. "Looks like old letters and documents." Emma shifted on the couch to get a better look. The papers were yellowed with age and tied with a faded ribbon. They looked like personal correspondence, the kind of thing that would only be meaningful to family members. "Probably just old family letters," Emma said with a sigh. "I can't imagine anyone would want to buy those." Jake untied the ribbon and began examining the papers more closely. His expression changed as he read, and Emma noticed that he had gone very still. "Jake, what is it?" "Emma," Jake said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I think you need to look at this." Emma struggled to sit up straighter, her curiosity overriding her disappointment. "What did you find?" Jake handed her a yellowed piece of paper that appeared to be some kind of official document. The header read, Last Will and Testament of Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore, and it was dated just 5 years earlier. This is a will, Emma said, confused. But why would it be in a box of junk? Shouldn't this be with lawyers or family members? That's what I thought too, Jake said, continuing to sift through the papers. But look at this. He handed her another document, this one more recent and bearing the letterhead of a law firm in the state capital. Emma read the letter, her eyes widening as she took in the contents. It was from an attorney named Robert Kellerman, addressed to the estate of Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore. The letter was dated just 6 months ago and mentioned something about unclaimed assets and final distribution pending location of beneficiaries. I don't understand, Emma said, looking up at Jake. What does this mean? Jake had pulled out more documents and was spreading them across the coffee table. Look at this, he said, pointing to a bank statement. This shows an account with Whitmore's name on it, and the balance is. He paused, double-checking the numbers. Emma, this account has over $50,000 in it. Emma felt her heart start to race. That can't be right. Why would documents like this be in a box at an auction? Shouldn't the family have all this information? That's what I'm wondering too, Jake said, examining more papers. But look at this correspondence. It seems like the law firm has been trying to locate relatives of Margaret Whitmore for months, and they haven't been able to find anyone. Emma's mind was spinning. If what they were reading was accurate, Margaret Whitmore had died with significant assets, and the legal system was having trouble finding her heirs. But that still didn't explain why these crucial documents had ended up in a box of junk at a village auction. We need to call this lawyer, Emma said, pointing to the letterhead. Robert Kellerman. If these documents are legitimate, he needs to know what happened to them. Jake nodded, but Emma could see the wheels turning in his head. Emma, what if? What if the family didn't know about these assets? What if Margaret Whitmore had accounts and property that no one knew about? That's possible, Emma said slowly. But Jake, even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that we don't have any claim to this money. It belongs to her family. I know that, Jake said quickly. I'm not suggesting we try to steal anything. I'm just saying that maybe there's a reward for finding this information, or maybe the lawyer can help us understand what happened. Emma looked at the documents spread across their coffee table, feeling overwhelmed by the implications. This morning she had been worried about $2 spent on a box of junk, and now she was looking at evidence of thousands of dollars in unclaimed assets. There's something else, Jake said, holding up a small, leather-bound notebook. This looks like it might be a personal journal or record book. Emma took the notebook and carefully opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten entries in a spidery script that was difficult to read. As she squinted at the faded ink, she began to make out dates and what appeared to be financial records. "Jake, I think this is a record of investments and assets," Emma said, her voice growing excited despite her exhaustion. "Look at these entries." She was tracking stocks, bonds, real estate. "There's a lot more here than just the bank account." Jake leaned over to look at the notebook, and Emma could see the amazement in his eyes. "Emma, if this is all accurate, we might be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars in unclaimed assets." The magnitude of what they might have stumbled onto was starting to sink in. Emma felt a mixture of excitement and overwhelming responsibility. If Margaret Whitmore had died with significant unclaimed assets, and if the legal system was struggling to find her heirs, then this information could be incredibly valuable. "We need to be very careful about how we handle this," Emma said, her natural caution overriding her excitement. "We need to contact the lawyer first and make sure we understand what's legal and what's not." Jake nodded, though Emma could see he was practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Should we call him now? It's still business hours." Emma glanced at the clock on the wall. It was just past 2 in the afternoon, and she realized that her entire world had shifted in the space of a few hours. This morning she had been a pregnant woman struggling to make ends meet, and now she was potentially holding the key to solving not just her own financial problems, but possibly helping to resolve a significant legal matter. "Let's call him," Emma decided. "But Jake, we need to be completely honest about how we got these documents. We can't let him think we're trying to pull some kind of scam." Jake was already reaching for his phone. "What's the number on that letterhead?" Emma read off the phone number, and Jake dialed. She could hear her heart pounding as the phone rang, and she found herself holding her breath as they waited for someone to answer. "Kellerman and Associates," came a professional female voice. "How may I help you?" "Hi," Jake said, his voice slightly nervous. "I'd like to speak with Robert Kellerman, please. It's regarding the Margaret Whitmore estate." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "May I ask who's calling and what this is regarding?" Jake looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. "My name is Jake Rodriguez, and my wife and I believe we may have found some important documents related to the Whitmore estate. We'd like to speak with Mr. Kellerman about them." "Please hold," the receptionist said, and the line went quiet except for soft classical music. Emma gripped Jake's free hand tightly, trying to calm her racing heart. The baby was moving actively, as if sensing her excitement and anxiety. She placed her other hand on her belly, whispering a silent prayer that everything would work out. "Mr. Rodriguez," came a new voice, deeper and more authoritative. "This is Robert Kellerman. I understand you're calling about the Whitmore estate." "Yes, sir," Jake said, his voice stronger now. Mr. Kellerman, my wife purchased a box at an auction yesterday, and we've found what appear to be important documents related to Margaret Whitmore's estate. We think you need to see them." There was a long pause before Kellerman responded. "Mr. Rodriguez, I have to ask you to be very careful about what you're claiming. The Whitmore estate is a complex matter, and we've been dealing with several individuals who have made false claims about having information or documents." "I understand your concern," Jake said, looking at Emma for support. "But Mr. Kellerman, we have what appears to be Margaret Whitmore's will, correspondence from your office, bank statements, and what looks like a detailed record of her investments. We're not making any claims about inheritance rights or anything like that. We just think these documents might be important to your investigation." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Emma began to worry they had been disconnected. Finally, Kellerman spoke again, and his tone had completely changed. "Mr. Rodriguez, can you describe the documents you're referring to? Specifically, can you tell me the date on the will and the account numbers on any bank statements?" Jake looked at Emma, who quickly found the will and read off the date. She then located a bank statement and carefully read the account number. "Dear God," Kellerman breathed. "Mr. Rodriguez, where did you say you obtained these documents?" "At a village auction," Jake repeated. "They were in a box of items that supposedly came from the Whitmore estate. My wife bought the box for $2 because everything else was too expensive." "Mr. Rodriguez, I need to see you and your wife immediately. Can you come to my office today?" Emma shook her head frantically, pointing to her belly and mouthing, "Bed rest." "Mr. Kellerman, my wife is on doctor-ordered bed rest due to pregnancy complications. She can't travel right now, but if you'd like to come to us, we'd be happy to show you everything we've found." There was another pause, and Emma could hear papers rustling in the background. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'm going to drive out to see you this afternoon. Can you give me your address?" Jake provided their address, and Kellerman said he would be there within 2 hours. After hanging up, Jake and Emma looked at each other with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "I think we might have really found something important," Emma said, her voice filled with wonder. "But Jake, what if we're wrong? What if these documents are fake, or what if we're somehow breaking the law by having them?" "I don't think we're breaking any laws," Jake said reassuringly. "We bought these documents legally at a public auction. Whatever happens, we're being honest about how we got them." Emma nodded, though she still felt nervous about the whole situation. She had never been involved in anything like this before, and the idea of dealing with lawyers and estate matters was intimidating. "Maybe we should organize all the documents before he gets here," Emma suggested. "That way we can present everything clearly." For the next hour, Emma and Jake carefully sorted through every item in the box, setting aside anything that appeared to be related to Margaret Whitmore's estate. By the time they were finished, they had a substantial pile of documents, including multiple bank statements, investment records, property deeds, and correspondence with various financial institutions. "Emma, look at this," Jake said, holding up a property deed. "Margaret Whitmore owned a house in the city, and according to this, it was never sold after she died." Emma examined the deed, noting that it was for a property in an upscale neighborhood that she knew had very high property values. "Jake, if she owned a house in that area, we could be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate alone." The more they discovered, the more amazed Emma became. Margaret Whitmore had apparently been a very wealthy woman, with assets spread across multiple banks and investment firms. Yet somehow, all of this information had ended up in a box of junk at a village auction. "I keep wondering how this happened," Emma said, settling back against her pillows. "How do important documents like this end up being sold for $2 at an auction?" "Maybe the family didn't know about them," Jake suggested. "Maybe Margaret kept all her financial information private, and when she died, the family just cleaned out her house without realizing what they were throwing away." Emma thought about this possibility. It would explain how the documents had ended up in the auction, but it also meant that Margaret Whitmore's heirs had potentially missed out on a significant inheritance. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Jake looked out the window and saw a black sedan parked in their driveway. "I think that's the lawyer," Jake said, moving toward the door. Emma quickly smoothed her hair and tried to look as presentable as possible while lying on the couch. She was nervous about meeting with a lawyer, especially given their current financial situation and the magnitude of what they might have discovered. Robert Kellerman turned out to be a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. He carried a leather briefcase and had the air of someone who was used to dealing with important matters. "Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez," he said, shaking Jake's hand and nodding politely to Emma. "Thank you for contacting me. I have to say, your phone call was quite unexpected." "Please sit down," Emma said, gesturing to the chair across from the couch. "I'm sorry I can't get up, but I'm on bed rest." "Of course," Kellerman said, settling into the chair. "Now, you mentioned that you found documents related to the Whitmore estate. May I see them?" Jake began handing over the documents they had organized, and Emma watched Kellerman's expression carefully. His professional demeanor remained intact, but she could see his eyes widening as he examined each item. "This is extraordinary," Kellerman said finally, looking up from the papers. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you said you purchased these at an auction." "Yes," Emma replied. It was the annual village auction, and this box was one of the last lots. I only bid $2 because that's all I could afford." Kellerman shook his head in amazement. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what you found here represents months of investigative work that we've been unable to complete. Margaret Whitmore died 18 months ago, and we've been trying to locate all of her assets ever since." "What happened to her family?" Jake asked. "Didn't they know about these accounts and investments?" "That's the complicated part," Kellerman explained. "Margaret Whitmore was a very private person, and she didn't have any close living relatives. Her nearest relatives are distant cousins who live in other states, and they had very little contact with her in her later years." Emma was beginning to understand the situation. So when she died, the family cleaned out her house and donated everything to the auction without realizing what they were getting rid of. "That appears to be exactly what happened," Kellerman confirmed. "The family hired an estate sale company to clear out the house, and they were instructed to donate anything that didn't sell. It seems that these crucial documents were mixed in with general household items and ended up in a donation box." "But surely the family knew she had money," Jake said. "They must have known about some of her assets." "They knew about some of them," Kellerman said. "There was a primary bank account that they were able to access, and they knew about her house, which they sold. But Margaret kept most of her financial information very private, and she had accounts and investments that the family never knew about." Emma felt a surge of sympathy for Margaret Whitmore. She had been a wealthy woman who had died alone, with no close family members to properly handle her affairs. It was a sad situation that had led to important documents being treated as junk. "So what happens now?" Emma asked. "Do these documents help you locate her heirs?" "Absolutely," Kellerman said, his excitement evident. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what you found here could result in significant additional inheritance for Margaret's relatives. Based on what I'm seeing, we're talking about several $100,000 in unclaimed assets." Emma and Jake exchanged glances. The magnitude of what they had stumbled onto was still sinking in. "Mr. Kellerman," Emma said carefully, "we want to be very clear that we're not making any claims to this money. We just want to make sure it gets to the right people." "I appreciate that," Kellerman said, and Emma could see respect in his eyes. "However, I want you to know that there are legal provisions for rewards in cases like this. People who help locate unclaimed assets are often entitled to a percentage of the recovery." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "What kind of percentage?" "It varies," Kellerman said, "but typically it's somewhere between 10 and 20% of the recovered assets. In this case, given the significant amount of money involved and the fact that we might never have found these assets without your help, I would expect the reward to be substantial." Emma did quick math in her head. If the total assets were several $100,000, even a 10% reward would be more money than she and Jake had ever dreamed of having. Of course, we'll need to go through the proper legal procedures, Kellerman continued. I'll need to authenticate all of these documents and begin the process of claiming the various assets. But Mrs. Rodriguez, I want you to know that what you've done here is remarkable. After Kellerman left, promising to keep them informed of his progress, Emma and Jake sat in stunned silence. The box that had seemed like such a disappointment just hours earlier had potentially changed their entire future. I can't believe this is real, Emma said, her hand resting on her belly. This morning I was worried about spending $2, and now we might be looking at a reward that could solve all our financial problems. Jake nodded, still looking dazed. Emma, if this works out, we could pay off all our medical bills, get caught up on our rent, maybe even put a down payment on a house. Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. For months, she had been lying awake at night worrying about how they were going to provide for their baby. The stress of their financial situation had been overwhelming, and she had felt like they were trapped in a cycle of debt and struggle. "What if it doesn't work out?" Emma asked, her natural caution asserting itself. "What if there's some legal complication? Or what if the documents aren't as valuable as Kellerman thinks?" "Then we'll be exactly where we were yesterday," Jake said, taking her hand. "But Emma, I have a good feeling about this." Kellerman seemed genuinely excited about what we found, and he's the expert. Over the next few days, Emma found it difficult to focus on anything else. Kellerman called daily with updates on his progress, and each conversation brought more good news. The documents were authentic, the assets were real, and the legal process was moving forward smoothly. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Kellerman said during one of their conversations, "I've been in touch with Margaret Whitmore's relatives, and they're absolutely thrilled about what you've discovered. They had no idea that Margaret had been so successful with her investments." Emma was glad to hear that the money would be going to Margaret's family, but she couldn't help thinking about what the reward might mean for her own family. The baby was due in just a few weeks, and the stress of their financial situation had been taking a toll on both her and Jake. "Mr. Kellerman, do you have any idea when we might know about the reward?" Emma asked. "I should have a better idea within the next week or two," Kellerman replied. "The courts move slowly, but this case is relatively straightforward. Mrs. Rodriguez, I want you to know that I've recommended the maximum possible reward percentage for you and your husband. What you've done here has saved the estate tens of thousands of dollars in investigative costs." Emma felt a flutter of excitement mixed with anxiety. The waiting was almost harder than not knowing had been. Every day brought the possibility of life-changing news, but it also brought the fear that something might go wrong. "Emma, you need to try to relax," Jake said one evening as they sat together on the couch. "The stress isn't good for you or the baby." "I know," Emma said, rubbing her belly. "It's just so hard to believe that this is really happening. Part of me keeps waiting for someone to tell us it was all a mistake." Jake squeezed her hand. "Even if it is a mistake, we've done the right thing. We found important documents and we made sure they got to the right people. That's something to be proud of, regardless of what happens with the reward." Emma nodded, knowing he was right. They had acted with integrity throughout the entire process, and that was what mattered most. Whatever happened with the reward, they could feel good about their actions. The call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Emma had first opened the box from the auction. She was dozing on the couch when the phone rang, and Jake answered it before she was fully awake. "Hello," Jake said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is Robert Kellerman. I have some news for you and your wife." Emma was instantly alert, sitting up as much as her current state allowed. Jake put the phone on speaker so she could hear the conversation. "Good news, I hope," Jake said. "Very good news," Kellerman replied, and Emma could hear the smile in his voice. "The court has approved the reward, and I'm pleased to tell you that you and Mrs. Rodriguez will be receiving 20% of the recovered assets." Emma's heart stopped. 20% of how much? "The total recovered assets amount to $437,000, Kellerman said. "That means your reward will be $87,400. Emma felt the world spinning around her. She gripped Jake's hand so tightly that he winced, but she couldn't seem to process what she was hearing. $87,000 was more money than they had ever imagined having. "Are you sure?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's no mistake." "No mistake," Kellerman confirmed. "The paperwork has been filed, and you should receive your check within the next 10 business days. Mrs. Rodriguez, I want you to know that this reward is well-deserved. Without your discovery, these assets would have likely remained unclaimed indefinitely." After they hung up, Emma and Jake sat in stunned silence. The magnitude of what had just happened was overwhelming. In the span of less than a month, they had gone from struggling to pay their bills to having enough money to completely change their lives. "We can pay off all our medical bills," Emma said finally, her voice filled with wonder. "We can catch up on our rent, we can buy a reliable car, we can even put money away for the baby's future." Jake nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Emma, our child is going to have opportunities we never dreamed of. We can provide for our family in ways we never thought possible." The next few days passed in a blur of planning and dreaming. Emma and Jake made lists of their debts and expenses, calculating exactly how the money would be used. They were both determined to be responsible with their windfall, using it to build a stable foundation for their growing family. "I want to pay off every single medical bill," Emma said, reviewing their paperwork. "I never want to worry about health care costs again. And I want to put money into a college fund for the baby," Jake added. "This child is going to have every opportunity we can give them." When the check arrived, Emma held it in her hands and stared at the numbers. It seemed impossible that such a small piece of paper could represent such a dramatic change in their circumstances. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing the excitement in the room. "I think our little one approves," Emma said, laughing as she felt another strong kick. The first thing they did was pay off all their medical bills. Emma felt an incredible sense of relief as she wrote each check, knowing that they would never again have to choose between health care and other necessities. The second thing they did was catch up on their rent and pay several months in advance, ensuring they wouldn't have to worry about housing security. "You know what I want to do," Emma said one evening as they sat together, planning their future. "I want to donate some money to the community center where the auction was held. If it weren't for that auction, none of this would have happened." Jake smiled. "That's a wonderful idea. How much were you thinking?" $1,000, Emma said. "It's not a huge amount compared to what we received, but it might help them with their programs." They also decided to set aside money for an emergency fund, something they had never been able to do before. Emma wanted to ensure that they would never again face the kind of financial stress that had dominated their lives for so long. As Emma's due date approached, she found herself feeling more optimistic about the future than she had in years. The stress that had been weighing on her throughout her pregnancy had lifted, replaced by excitement about welcoming their child into a stable, secure environment. "I keep thinking about Margaret Whitmore," Emma said one afternoon. "I wish I could have met her. She indirectly changed our entire lives." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "In a way, she did meet you. Her legacy is what made this possible." Emma went into labor on a sunny Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks after receiving the reward check. Unlike her earlier scare, this time everything proceeded normally. Jake drove her to the hospital with calm confidence, knowing that they could afford whatever care she needed. Their daughter, Sophia Marie Rodriguez, was born healthy and beautiful at 6:47 p.m. As Emma held her newborn daughter for the first time, she thought about the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. A $2 purchase at a village auction had changed everything. "Hello, little one," Emma whispered to Sophia. "You're going to have such a wonderful life." The hospital stay was stress-free, with Jake and Emma able to focus entirely on their new daughter without worrying about the cost. When they brought Sophia home, it was to a house that was paid up on rent, with a nursery that had everything a baby could need. "I want to frame that receipt," Emma said, looking at the $2 receipt from the auction that had started it all. Sophia should know the story of how her college fund got started. Over the following months, Emma and Jake settled into their new life as parents. The financial security they now enjoyed allowed them to focus on what truly mattered: their family. Emma was able to extend her maternity leave without worrying about lost income, and Jake was able to reduce his overtime hours to spend more time with his daughter. "You know what's funny?" Emma said one evening as she nursed Sophia. "I spent so much time worrying about money during my pregnancy, and it turns out the solution was sitting in a box at an auction the whole time." Jake laughed. "Life has a strange way of working out sometimes. But Emma, I think we would have been okay either way. We would have found a way to make it work." Emma nodded, knowing he was right. They had always been resourceful and determined, and they would have managed somehow. But the windfall from the auction had given them something precious: the ability to provide for their daughter without constant stress and worry. As Sophia grew, Emma often told her the story of the auction and the box of documents. It became a family legend, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected opportunities can arise from the most ordinary circumstances. "The moral of the story," Emma would say, "is that you should always be kind and honest, because you never know what doors those qualities might open." When Sophia was 6 months old, Emma and Jake decided to visit Margaret Whitmore's grave. They had learned more about her through their interactions with Kellerman and her family, and they felt a deep sense of gratitude toward the woman who had unknowingly changed their lives. The cemetery was peaceful, with tall trees providing shade over the well-maintained grounds. Margaret's grave was marked with a simple headstone that bore her name and the dates of her birth and death. There were fresh flowers on the grave, presumably left by her relatives. "Thank you," Emma said quietly, placing a small bouquet of wildflowers next to the headstone. "Thank you for the opportunity you gave our family." Sophia gurgled happily from her stroller, reaching for the colorful flowers with her tiny hands. Emma imagined that Margaret would have enjoyed meeting her, and she made a mental note to bring Sophia back to visit when she was older. On the first anniversary of the auction, Emma and Jake decided to attend again. This time, they went not as desperate buyers hopping to find something they could afford, but as people who wanted to support their community and remember the day that had changed their lives. "Look at that," Jake said, pointing to a familiar box on one of the auction tables. "Another box of miscellaneous items from an estate sale." Emma laughed. "Should we bid on it, Lightning might strike twice. I don't think we need any more life-changing surprises, Jake said, bouncing Sophia in his arms. We've got everything we need right here. As they watched the auction proceed, Emma reflected on how different her life was now compared to a year ago. She was no longer the desperate pregnant woman standing in the back of the room, worrying about $2. She was a confident mother with a secure future and a beautiful family. The auctioneer, Marcus Thompson, recognized them and approached during a break in the bidding. "Well, if it isn't our lucky winner from last year," he said with a grin. "I heard about what happened with that box you bought. Quite a story." "It certainly was," Emma agreed. "Mr. Thompson, we wanted to thank you for running such a well-organized auction. If you hadn't been so professional, we might never have had the courage to bid." Thompson waved off the thanks, but Emma could see he was pleased. "Just doing my job. Though I have to say, in 30 years of running auctions, I've never seen anything quite like what happened with you folks." As they prepared to leave, Emma noticed a young couple standing at the back of the room, much as she had done a year earlier. The woman was obviously pregnant, and they both looked anxious and uncertain. Emma recognized the expression on their faces because she had worn it herself. "Jake," she said quietly, "I want to do something." She approached the couple and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Emma Rodriguez. I couldn't help but notice that you're expecting. When is your baby due?" The woman, who introduced herself as Lisa, smiled nervously. "In about 3 months. We're hopping to find something we can afford that we might be able to resell. Money's been tight since I had to stop working." Emma felt a surge of empathy. "I completely understand. I was in the exact same situation last year." She spent a few minutes talking with Lisa and her husband David, learning about their circumstances and their hopes for the auction. When she learned that they had only $20 to spend, Emma made a decision that felt completely right. "I want to give you something," Emma said, pulling out her wallet. "Last year I only had $20 too, and I ended up finding something that changed our lives. I'd like to give you a little more to work with." She handed Lisa $200, ignoring the couple's protests. "Please, take this. Consider it paying forward a kindness that was shown to me." Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I can't take this much money from a stranger." "You're not a stranger," Emma said gently. "You're a fellow parent trying to do the best for your family. That's all the connection I need." As Emma and Jake drove home with Sophia, Emma felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The money she had given to Lisa and David wouldn't solve all their problems, but it would give them more options and more hope. Sometimes, that was enough to make all the difference. "I'm proud of you," Jake said, reaching over to squeeze Emma's hand. "What you did back there was beautiful." Emma smiled, looking back at Sophia sleeping peacefully in her car seat. I just remembered what it felt like to be in their position. If we can help someone else the way we were helped, then our good fortune has an even greater purpose. Over the years that followed, Emma and Jake continued to use their windfall wisely. They bought a modest house in a good neighborhood, invested in Sophia's education, and built a stable foundation for their family. But perhaps most importantly, they never forgot the lessons they had learned from their experience. They remained active in their community, supporting local causes and helping other families in need. Emma often spoke at community events about the importance of integrity and kindness, using her own story as an example of how doing the right thing can lead to unexpected rewards. The real treasure wasn't the money, Emma would tell her audiences. The real treasure was learning that even in our darkest moments, hope and opportunity can come from the most unexpected places. When Sophia was old enough to understand, Emma took her to visit the community center where the auction had been held. The building had been renovated with help from various donors, including Emma and Jake, and it now served as a hub for community activities and support programs. "This is where it all started," Emma told her daughter, pointing to the room where the auction had taken place. "This is where Mama bought a box for $2 that changed our whole lives." Sophia, now a bright and curious 5-year-old, looked around the room with wide eyes. "And that's how I got my college money." Emma laughed. "That's right, sweetheart. That's how you got your college money." As they walked through the community center, Emma reflected on how much had changed since that day. The center now offered financial literacy classes, job training programs, and support services for families in need. Emma and Jake had helped fund several of these programs, hoping to give other families the tools they needed to improve their situations. "Mama," Sophia said, tugging on Emma's hand, "can we come back here again?" "Of course we can," Emma replied. "This place will always be special to our family." On their way home, they stopped at Margaret Whitmore's grave again. Sophia had been asking about the lady who had helped them, and Emma thought she was old enough to understand the story. Margaret was a kind lady who worked very hard and saved her money, Emma explained to Sophia. When she died, her family didn't know about all the money she had saved. But because we found her papers, her family got the money they were supposed to have, and we got a reward for helping. Sophia placed a small flower on the grave, something she had insisted on doing. "Thank you, Miss Margaret," she said solemnly. Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. Her daughter was growing up with an understanding of gratitude and giving back that many children never developed. The experience that had begun with a $2 purchase at an auction had taught their entire family valuable lessons about life. As Sophia started school, Emma began volunteering at the community center, helping to coordinate the annual auction that had changed their lives. She made sure that the event remained accessible to families with limited resources, remembering what it had felt like to stand in the back of the room with only $20. "Every box has a story," Emma would tell the volunteers. "We never know what treasures people might find, whether they're worth $2 or $200,000. The auction had become something of a legend in their small community. People came from neighboring towns to participate, drawn by the story of the woman who had found a fortune in a box of junk. Emma always made sure that the focus remained on the community benefits rather than on her own story. "The real magic of the auction isn't in finding valuable items," Emma would say. "It's in bringing our community together and supporting each other." When Sophia was 7, she asked if she could help at the auction. Emma agreed, and Sophia spent the day helping to organize items and greeting visitors. She was particularly drawn to the boxes of miscellaneous items, carefully examining each one as if she might find another treasure. "You never know what's in there," Sophia told a young couple who were considering bidding on a box of books. "My mama found important papers in a box like this one." Emma smiled, watching her daughter's enthusiasm. Sophia had inherited her parents' optimism and determination, but she had also learned the value of helping others. It was clear that she would grow up to be a thoughtful and generous person. As the years passed, Emma and Jake continued to manage their windfall carefully. They had paid off their house, established substantial savings accounts, and invested in Sophia's future. But they had also made sure to use their good fortune to help others. They had quietly paid medical bills for several families in their community, funded scholarships for local students, and supported various charitable causes. They had learned that having money wasn't just about security for their own family, but about having the power to make a positive difference in the world. "I think Margaret would be proud," Emma said one evening as she and Jake reviewed their charitable giving for the year. "Her legacy has helped so many people, not just her own family." Jake nodded. "And it all started with you having the courage to bid $2 on a box of junk." Emma laughed. "I wasn't being courageous. I was being desperate, but maybe sometimes that's the same thing." When Sophia turned 10, Emma decided to take her to meet Robert Kellerman, the lawyer who had helped them navigate the legal aspects of their discovery. Kellerman was now retired, but he had remained in touch with the family over the years. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Kellerman said, greeting them warmly in his former office, "and this must be the famous Sophia. I've heard so much about you." Sophia shook his hand politely. "Thank you for helping my mama and daddy." "It was my pleasure," Kellerman said. "Your parents did something remarkable, and I was honored to be part of their story. During their visit, Kellerman showed Sophia some of the original documents that Emma had found in the box. He explained how important the discovery had been and how it had helped resolve a complex legal situation. Your mother's integrity and honesty made all the difference, Kellerman told Sophia. She could have tried to claim the money for herself, but instead, she did the right thing. That's why she was rewarded. Sophia studied the documents with interest, asking thoughtful questions about the legal process. Emma could see that her daughter was developing a strong sense of justice and fairness. "I want to be a lawyer like you when I grow up," Sophia announced. "I want to help people like you helped my family." Kellerman smiled. "I think you would make an excellent lawyer, Sophia. You have the right instincts for it." As they drove home, Emma reflected on how her daughter's life had been shaped by their experience. Sophia had grown up with security and opportunities, but she had also learned the importance of helping others and doing the right thing. "Mama," Sophia said from the back seat, "what would have happened if you hadn't gone to the auction that day?" Emma thought about the question. "I don't know, sweetheart. We probably would have found another way to manage our problems, but it would have been much harder. Sometimes life gives us unexpected opportunities, and we have to be ready to recognize them. And we have to be brave enough to try," Sophia added. "That's right," Emma agreed. "We have to be brave enough to try." On Sophia's 16th birthday, Emma and Jake decided to tell her the complete story of the auction and the box of documents. They had shared pieces of the story over the years, but they wanted her to understand the full magnitude of what had happened. "The money changed our circumstances," Emma explained, "but it was the experience that changed us as people. We learned that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, can lead to unexpected rewards." Sophia listened intently, asking questions about the timeline and the legal process. She was particularly interested in the ethical aspects of the situation. "You could have kept the money, couldn't you?" Sophia asked. "Nobody would have known that you had found those documents." Emma nodded. "That's true, but we would have known, and we wouldn't have been able to live with ourselves. The money belonged to Margaret Whitmore's family, not to us. And because you did the right thing, you were rewarded," Sophia said, understanding the moral of the story. "Exactly," Jake said. "And the reward was more than just money. It was the knowledge that we had acted with integrity, and it was the opportunity to help other people." As Sophia prepared for college, she chose to study law, inspired by her family's experience and her desire to help others navigate complex legal situations. She had grown up with the advantages that her parents' windfall had provided, but she had also learned the importance of using those advantages to benefit others. "I want to specialize in estate law," Sophia announced during her senior year of high school. I want to help families avoid the kind of confusion that happened with Margaret Whitmore's estate. Emma felt proud of her daughter's choice. Sophia had developed into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman who understood the value of helping others. During Sophia's first year of college, Emma decided to write a book about their experience. She wanted to share the story not just as entertainment, but as a lesson about integrity, perseverance, and the unexpected ways that life can change. The $2 Treasure became a local bestseller, with Emma donating all the proceeds to community programs. The book resonated with readers who had faced their own financial struggles and who were inspired by the story of a family who had maintained their integrity despite desperate circumstances. Emma was invited to speak at events across the region, sharing her story and encouraging others to never give up hope. She always emphasized that the real treasure hadn't been the money, but the lessons they had learned and the opportunities they had been given to help others. Every day is an auction, Emma would tell her audiences. Every day we have the opportunity to bid on our futures with our choices and our actions. The question is, what are we willing to invest in, and are we brave enough to try? When Sophia graduated from law school, she returned to their hometown to establish her own practice. She specialized in estate planning and probate law, helping families organize their affairs and avoid the kind of confusion that had led to Margaret Whitmore's documents ending up in an auction box. I want to make sure that other families don't miss out on their inheritance because of poor planning, Sophia explained to her parents. And I want to help people understand the importance of keeping their family informed about their assets. Emma watched her daughter's career with pride. Sophia had taken the lessons from their family's experience and turned them into a mission to help others. It was the perfect continuation of the story that had begun with a $2 purchase at a village auction. On the 20th anniversary of the auction, Emma and Jake returned to the community center with Sophia and her new husband, Michael. The building had been renovated several times over the years, with help from various donors, and it now served as a regional hub for community services. This is where it all began, Emma told Michael, pointing to the room where the auction had taken place. This is where your mother-in-law bought a box for $2 that changed our family's entire future. Michael, who had heard the story many times, still seemed amazed by it. It's incredible to think that so much could come from such a small purchase. The purchase was small, Sophia said, but the decision to do the right thing was huge. That's what made all the difference. As they walked through the community center, Emma reflected on how much had changed since that day 20 years earlier. The center now offered dozens of programs and services, many of which had been funded by donations from Emma and Jake. The annual auction had become a major community event, drawing participants from across the region. "I still can't believe it sometimes," Emma said to Jake as they watched a new group of hopeful bidders examining boxes of miscellaneous items. "I still can't believe that our $2 purchase led to all of this." Jake squeezed her hand. "I can believe it. You've always had a talent for finding treasure in unexpected places." Emma smiled, looking around at the bustling community center, at her accomplished daughter and her kind son-in-law, and at all the people who had been helped by the programs they had funded. The $2 treasure had indeed changed everything, but not in the way she had originally expected. The real treasure hadn't been the money, though that had certainly been important. The real treasure had been the journey itself, the lessons learned, and the opportunities to help others. It had been the chance to discover that even in the darkest moments, hope and possibility were always present. As they prepared to leave the anniversary celebration, Emma noticed a young woman standing at the back of the room, clutching a small child and looking uncertain. She looked exactly as Emma had looked 20 years earlier, desperate and hopeful and trying to be brave. Emma approached the woman and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Emma Rodriguez. I couldn't help but notice that you're interested in the auction. Are you looking for anything in particular?" The woman, who said her name was Amanda, explained that she was hopping to find something she could afford that might be valuable. She had recently lost her job and was struggling to make ends meet. "I understand completely," Emma said gently. "I was in the exact same situation 20 years ago. Let me tell you something. The most valuable thing you can bring to an auction isn't money. It's integrity and hope." She spent several minutes talking with Amanda, sharing encouragement and advice. When she learned that Amanda had only $10 to spend, Emma made a decision that felt completely natural. "I'd like to give you something," Emma said, pulling out her wallet. 20 years ago, someone's kindness changed my life. I'd like to pay that forward." She handed Amanda $200, just as she had done for Lisa and David years earlier. "Use this wisely, and remember that sometimes the greatest treasures come from the most unexpected places." As Emma and her family drove home, she felt a deep sense of completion. The story that had begun with a $2 purchase at a village auction had come full circle. She had been helped when she needed it most, and now she was in a position to help others. "Do you think Amanda will find something valuable?" Sophia asked from the back seat. Emma smiled. "I think she already has. She's found hope and kindness and the knowledge that people care about her. Sometimes that's the most valuable treasure of all." The $2 treasure had indeed changed everything, creating ripples of kindness and opportunity that continued to spread through their community and beyond. And Emma knew that the story was far from over. Every day brought new opportunities to help others, to share the lessons they had learned, and to continue the legacy of integrity and generosity that had defined their family's journey. In the end, Emma realized the greatest treasure wasn't what they had found in that box 20 years ago. The greatest treasure was what they had built with it, a life of purpose, a family committed to helping others, and a community strengthened by shared values and mutual support. That was worth far more than any amount of money, and it was a legacy that would continue for generations to come.